Welcome, fertility sisters, to the True Fertility Podcast. I'm your host, Leah Nicole Trujillo, a wife, mom, and therapist turned fertility coach after a challenging 7-year journey to conceive. Join me for stories from those who've walked this path, tips for your fertility and IVF journey, and some fertility-related girl talk. So let's sprinkle some of that baby dust because it's time for True Fertility. You've heard it all your life. Exercise to be healthy. The more exercise, the better. We need to move, right? But when we're trying to conceive, is this the same advice? As I started to learn more and more about fertility, I started to question more than ever that concept. And over time, I started to embrace more gentle forms of exercise because honestly, quite frankly, I felt like I was pushing so hard in other areas. I just didn't have it in me to push there. And that's where I found fertility yoga, a gentle practice that helps you mentally and physically. And let me tell you a little secret before you immediately say that this isn't for you. I hated yoga. Yes, in my 20s, I totally didn't get it. I was and still am inflexible as fuck. And honestly, when I tried yoga in the past, I felt bored. I felt like being still in a particular posture was super boring. And it was just almost like mental torture. Like, when are we going to move on to the next thing? This is boring. And honestly, I didn't think I was doing any good either. Like, where was the calorie burn? I thought this was supposed to be exercise. I felt like I was wasting that hour. But over time, I've learned that this practice is so much more than that. And to help explain and answer more of the questions that myself and listeners have about this amazing practice, I have none other than Jennifer Edmonds, who is amazing, has built a fertility yoga empire after her own infertility journey. And in this episode, I'm going to be asking her about the role of exercise in general when trying to conceive, what exercises are optimal for this chapter and exactly when, including during the 2-week wait, and of course, all about fertility yoga and exactly how it works and how it can possibly help you in your journey to conceive. So perk up, ladies. This one's all for you. Now, before we get started with today's episode, I wanted to offer my listeners an opportunity to snag my free class, Triple Your IVF Success with Less Stress. Inside this free masterclass, you'll receive 2 simple tools that you can start on today that have been proven to triple your success rates when trying to conceive. These tools not only help you boost your fertility, but also help you feel better now. So if you're looking to get your baby in your arms faster, reduce the number of IVF rounds, and ultimately save money, time, and energy, this is the tool for you. Go to www.leahnicolecoaching.com, that's LEANICOLE, coaching.com to grab this free class while it's available. Welcome back to another episode of the True Fertility Podcast. I am so excited because I am joined here today by none other than the absolutely amazing Jennifer Edmonds. Yay! We should have. I need a round of applause in there for sure.
Intro, Lee. Thank you. You are so kind, Leah. Thank you so much for having me, and it's a real honor to speak with you today.
Yes. So Jen is actually a yoga, Pilates, meditation, and breathwork teacher who specializes in fertility and women's health. After a long and difficult fertility journey of her own, Jennifer eventually found the practice of fertility yoga. This practice was actually able to help her ease her anxiety while trying to conceive, relieve chronic insomnia, rebalance a thyroid condition, and eventually helped her to fall pregnant naturally. She now runs an online business, Element Pilates and Yoga, helping women all over the world to overcome fertility challenges and find their way to motherhood. So, wow.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
It's been a long journey for myself and for the business to get to here. But yeah, I'm really excited to speak to you about it today.
Yes. And I just kind of wanted to say how me and Jen connected. So I actually found Jen through social media. I had first off was caught by her funny antics and lightheartedness that she brings around to such a serious subject of infertility. And I was immediately drawn in by that. I was like, I need more of this in my life. So definitely followed her, had quite a few laughs just looking at her social media because of all of the relatable content that she shares regularly. I, personally have used fertility yoga and had been looking for somebody that I could, refer my clients to because I think it's such a huge thing and enter, a closer connection with Jen. And she's here today. So again, I am so honored to have her. And I know you guys are going to absolutely love our conversation today as we're going to talk and delve more about fertility yoga. But before we get there, I did kind of want to start off our podcast today with a few just fun rapid fire questions so you all can get to know Jen a little bit better. So we're just going to get to that. Put Jen in the hot seat for a second. Does that sound okay, Jen?
Let's do it.
All right. So my first question for you is, what is your favorite song from your teenage years that
Oh gosh.
you still love to jam out to, maybe have a little dance party to, or really gets you in that fun mood? What is that song for you, Jen?
So I suppose I'm going to be showing my age and my dagginess, but it has to be Backstreet's Back. And anyone who has followed me for any length of time on social media will know that I can never go past an audio that is by Backstreet Boys. So I apologize.
That's awesome. Have you been able to see them on tour or anything?
Yes, of course. I saw them. They came to Sydney. Actually, it was when I was in my 20s, and they were already kind of not in their prime. But regardless, it was a very exciting night. And I know they are touring again, but they haven't come back to Australia for a while, which is very sad. Although, like at some point, guys, I think you just might need to give it a rest.
Never, Jen, never. All right. Well, question number 2. Who is your favorite cartoon character?
Cartoon character. Oh, gosh. I'd say the most obvious one that comes to mind is Peppa Pig, but that's for different reasons. That would not be my favorite. That's just perhaps the most prevalent in my house. I think I'd have to go Ariel from The Little Mermaid. She was always my favorite. And the way she used her voice, it's inspiring.
Definitely. And actually, Little Mermaid was my absolute favorite Disney movie as well. I am not a singer by any means, yet I knew all of the songs by heart and would bust into my parents' room regularly at 7 a.m. singing Little Mermaid songs. So I feel you on that.
I think we all did.
Yes. Last rapid fire question is, what is your favorite yoga pose?
Ooh. So as I get older, the more I love restorative yoga, which when I break it down is basically laying around on pillows. That's basically what restorative yoga is. So my favorite would have to be Viparita Karani, or we call legs up the wall. So you lay on your back, hips close to the wall, and you just let your legs extend above you. And you can pop a little pillow under your head or maybe a bolster under your hips if you want to take it a bit deeper. But it is so grounding and restorative. It's almost a guarantee magic pill for a good night's sleep. And it is my go-to with all of my students as well.
Oh, I love that one. And I have been lucky enough to try that one. And yes, agree. It is really nice. And it gives you a nice little stretch in your hamstrings there too.
It sure does.
All right. So before we kind of get into questions about yoga and fertility, I wanted to spend a little bit of time, if you can share your story in how you got here today, if
Hmm.
you don't mind,
So,
Jen.
like most of us, like yourself, Leah, who work in this space, I have a long fertility journey of my own. And I was one of those very unlucky ones that dealt with both primary and secondary infertility for very different reasons, which was endlessly frustrating. And I got married when I was 33. And my husband and I always knew we wanted to start a family. And we moved overseas really soon after we got married. So we gave it about a year of traveling and, being a young married couple and doing all of the fun things before we decided to start settling down and having our family. So when I was 34, we decided we'd start trying. I had a hormonal IUD removed. And my doctor said to me at the time, look, it can take 2 or 3 months for your cycle to come back or to become regular, but you can start trying straight away when it does. So we were super excited. We're both relatively young in the scheme of things. We didn't have any health issues. We didn't have any cause for concern. It didn't even cross my mind that fertility would be an issue.
Mhm.
But my cycle never came back. And after about 6 months, I went back to the doctor just to have some basic testing done. Everything looked normal. And she said, oh, sometimes it can just take a bit longer. Just keep waiting.
Mhm.
So we did. And we did. And after about the 12-month mark, we started getting a bit concerned. So by this stage, my gynecologist kind of shrugged her shoulders and said, look, well, all your tests are normal in inverted commas, which, it isn't normal for a 34-year-old to not be menstruating. So we were referred to a fertility doctor. And his initial response was, you've likely gone through early menopause. So bad luck, which was not the thing that someone who's wanting to start a family wants to hear. So he did a few more tests, and the only thing that came back a little abnormal was my AMH levels were very low, my FSH levels were very high. So that's a sign of premature ovarian failure. And we were devastated. I had some friends who had been through IVF, and I had seen what it had done to their relationship and their lives, and it was really hard to watch. But he said because I wasn't getting a period, we could try a couple of rounds of ovulation induction to see if that worked, which it didn't. It didn't make me ovulate. So we were referred straight to IVF. And it was kind of a relief. It had been about 18 months by this stage. And I thought, look, at least now we have an option for something to work. And I think everyone goes into IVF thinking, this is finally the thing that will help me. I've been through so much already. I'm finally at the end of the line. Here's what I need. But I did not respond to the meds at all. So my ovaries did not produce any follicles. My hormone levels did not rise even a tiny bit. So after about 2 weeks of stims, that cycle was cancelled because there were no eggs to collect. So we're now looking at the possibility of IVF not even being an option for us. And where does that leave you? So this was really hard. This was a really low point. And we were living in Thailand at the time, and I found the medical system there really difficult to navigate. But I knew some friends in Sydney back in Australia who had had particular success with one doctor. So I decided to fly back to Sydney for a couple of months and do a cycle with her, which was a hard decision. I had to give up my work, and my husband couldn't come with me. He had to come back and forth a few times, obviously for, his important deliveries and things like that. But we were lucky this round started off quite well, and I did respond to the medication. She had me on an entirely different protocol. And the day of the egg collection, we found out I got 3 eggs collected, which I was, slightly disappointed about because we always want a big number, but we had 3 eggs, but only one of them fertilized. And gosh, anyone who's been through IVF knows it is such a numbers game. And to know that you've only got one tiny little embryo that's got to survive the next 5 days in a petri dish and then survive a transfer and be chromosomally normal and last an entire pregnancy, like the chances are pretty low. But it did. And that little girl was a fighter, and she made it all the way. So that was our first journey of infertility. Gosh, we were so lucky. She's 5.5 now. And we always knew we wanted to have 2 children. And, we're both only children. And that was the decision that we had to come to before we started trying. When she was about 1, I stopped breastfeeding, and the most amazing thing happened. My cycle returned just out of nowhere. It just started back on its own. Oh my gosh, we were so excited. I was so relieved. And we thought, we're just going to start trying straight away because we want to have our second baby. We want to move on from these years of trying to conceive and just get on with our lives. And, we didn't even get to try the first time around, which was disappointing. I thought, gosh, at least this time we can try and we can track my cycle and it's so exciting and yay. Sadly, it didn't go quite the way we planned. And we tried naturally for about 6 months. I had a regular cycle. It was a little shorter than 28 days, but, it was still regular. I was tracking ovulation. By this time, we were living in Dubai, and I went to a new doctor, and she said, look, your tests are again on the normal side. She checked again my AMH and my FSH levels, which weren't optimal, but they weren't terrible. She said, just keep trying. Those famous words. So then again, after about a year, nothing had happened. So we did some more investigations. It had turned out I had developed a thyroid condition. We did a hycosi and we found my fallopian tubes were partially blocked. I had developed chronic insomnia. So I was put on sleeping tablets. She decided to do some more ovulation induction with progesterone support. So I was taking thyroid meds, stimulation meds, progesterone, and sleeping tablet. I was a mess. Anyway, surprise, surprise, that didn't work. So coupled with my age, I was, I think, 38 at this time, we were referred back to IVF. So we were like, oh, after all this, we thought we had such an easy way into this second baby, but no. But at the same time, again, I was relieved because IVF had worked and I thought we can be done, we can move on. So this time the cycle went really well. We got 2 beautiful little embryos.
Wow.
Neither of them were successful. So sadly, the day after we found out that I wasn't pregnant after that second embryo, we went into lockdown over COVID. This was at the end of March in 2020. So even if we had wanted to try again, the clinics were shut because I think as a lot of people who were going through it at this time know that IVF was considered a non-essential surgery. Probably my lowest point. I still couldn't sleep. It had been like months of being pumped full of hormones. And I just remember this one night, it's like 3:00 in the morning. I was crying on the bathroom floor thinking like this can't go on. Something needs to change. And, I talking about secondary infertility is important, I think, but it triggers a lot of people as well because, it's seen as not as much of a big deal as primary infertility. But, I found it so much harder because of, I think the journey was more difficult on its own, but, you're left with these feelings of guilt and shame. You think, I've got this perfect little child and all I want is more. Why don't I just appreciate what I have? And, it doesn't help that people and doctors are telling you things like, you already have a child. Don't worry about it. Lots of people only have single child families. It doesn't matter. But so you're left thinking, what's wrong with me? Why do I want more? And you feel so guilty for spending so much time and effort trying to create a sibling for this beautiful little person. So I found that really difficult.
Wow.
Anyway, I was teaching Pilates at this time. I had been teaching Pilates for about 12 years. And I never really got yoga. I didn't really get it. Like I would go to a class, I'd be lying down. I'd think, this is so freaking boring. Can we do some push-ups or something? Like I was an athlete growing up. Pilates is very active. I just wanted to get something out of my workout. So I found yoga really challenging and I didn't understand why people liked it so much. But I had a friend at the time I used to work with. Did you find the same thing?
Yeah, I feel like it's funny that you say that because I totally agree with you on that. Like, I thought that, if I'm doing an exercise, I should be, feeling my heart rate get up. And like, I didn't understand. I didn't consider yoga
Yeah.
often as an exercise. I just thought it was just like, just for some BS time. I don't know, like that was my initial thoughts of yoga. And I'm not flexible either. So that's why I
Yeah,
didn't
I
get it.
completely agreed. So I didn't give it much thought of it till a friend of mine that I used to work with who was a yoga teacher said to me, look, Jen, I know you don't want advice and I don't know if you're interested, but I have a friend who teaches fertility yoga and she has had some amazing results and success stories with her students. Do you want to meet her? And I thought, look, I literally have nothing else to lose and I have nothing else to do because my studio is closed. I can't go to work. I'm at home in lockdown. So I was thought, look, why not? And one of the gifts, well, one of the only gifts that COVID gave us was that pretty much everyone in the fitness world took their businesses online. And so I was able to work with people who I would never have been able to connect with previously. So I met this amazing woman who was also Australian, actually, and she did a program for me. And I just fell in love with it. It was bizarre. It was the only thing that I hadn't done on this journey. And I had done fucking everything, like you name it. I was taking my 19 supplements a day. I was going to acupuncture 3 times a week. I was going to hypnosis twice a week. I was, tracking my cycle, seeing my doctor, eating the perfect diet, going to bed early, not drinking alcohol, not eating gluten, cutting out dairy, all this nonsense. I did it all. Super type A, super left-brained, more. What else can I do?
Mm-hmm.
But the only thing I hadn't done was just stop and slow down and breathe. And I remember the first time, oh my God, I'm going to cry thinking of this memory. First time I did a session with her, she had me put my hands over my womb and breathe. And she said, ask your body if it has any messages for you. And I'll get a bit woo-woo, but clear as day, this message came into my head. My body saying, you never gave me a chance. And
Oh
it
my
was
gosh.
true. I was just pushing and pushing and pushing, but I never actually stopped and slowed down and asked my body what it actually needed.
Oh
So
my God.
I was hooked and I started practicing daily, and we can get into what a daily practice looks like, but it was not super energetic. And little things started to change in my life. I'd wake up in the morning and I would be less miserable. I was nicer to my husband. I found it easier to be present with my daughter, and that was a big thing for me. I found that I could just be with her and play with her and not be racked with guilt about, when is she going to have a sibling, and another month has gone by and this age gap is getting wider and wider and all of the things that go with that. And then bigger things started to happen. My insomnia disappeared, which was life-changing. Gosh, being able to sleep was such a
Oh,
gift. I was on thyroid medication, and without having changed my meds, my lab results started to improve from my thyroid condition, which that was the only thing I had changed in my life was my yoga practice. And then a couple of months later, I fell pregnant. And this was the biggest shock of my life. And it had happened naturally, completely unexpected. And we were over the moon, to say the least. We went to the doctor. We confirmed the pregnancy. My hormone levels were rising. Everything was looking great. I started getting morning sickness. We had a scan at 8 weeks, and we heard those awful words that so many of us have heard. We're sorry, there's no heartbeat. So
so
this was,
sorry.
oh, thank you. This was a really, really hard time.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. And don't get me wrong, I couldn't get out of bed. I was devastated. But it wasn't my lowest point. There was something in the back of my mind playing around this idea that I had done something that no doctor told me was possible. After everything we'd been through and all of the problems that we had, and it was something that we were able to do. So I was fascinated. Because I had quite an exercise science background, I wanted to learn more about the practice of yoga. And I wanted to know why it had had such an effect on my body and my life, and how it had helped me fall pregnant. So I retrained as a yoga teacher. And after I did that initial 500-hour training, I found a school that specialized in pre and postnatal training, hormonal balance yoga, and of course, fertility yoga. So I dived into all of that. Absolutely loved it, learned as much as I could, and started employing all of the principles into my life. And at the very, very end of 2020, I fell pregnant again. And this time he became my little boy, who is now 2. And so that's my journey, and that's why I do the work that I do. And that brings me to here today. And I talk about my journey so often, and without fail, it always brings me to tears. So I hope that my journey gives people a little bit of hope to show you that literally anything is possible.
No, Jen, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. It is definitely inspiring. And, again, whenever I tell my story the same, I definitely spill a few tears each time and get emotional. I mean, I think sometimes we don't realize this is such a huge deal and it is really life changing. And, instead of, sweeping it under the rug or anything like that, we need to honor that. And I think no matter how far along you are in your journey, it's only normal for it to bring you back and to have those emotions when you retell that
Mm.
story. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for sharing it. It's such a beautiful story and so inspiring. So it makes total sense that you do what you do and are willing to lead other women into this place of, calm and support for their body on this journey. So, can you tell me a little bit more about what kind of exercise you can do when you're trying to conceive, or what kind of exercise is ideal when you're trying to conceive?
Mhm. This is a really big question and something that I go into a lot with my students. And because I do have the exercise science background, I can bring a lot of those principles into my work as well, not just yoga, which is super helpful. Basically, in a very broad way of putting it, less is more when you are trying to conceive. And that's not to say that you don't exercise and that you don't go for those high intensity workouts, but we try to lessen the load. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and I'll get into why. But the most important thing I think that you need to be aware of when you are trying to conceive and you're trying to pair exercise with that journey is looking at your menstrual cycle, dividing it into the 4 specific phases that we have. So menstruation, follicular phase, ovulatory phase, and then the luteal phase, or the 2-week wait. And knowing what your body needs hormonally and energetically at each particular phase and matching your exercise in accordance with those phases.
Hmm.
So that is super, super important. So what that looks like is during menstruation, we rest. And I know this is hard for a lot of people to hear because we always grow up with this idea that, your period is something you need to ignore and push away and take some pain relief if you're getting cramps and just get on with your day. But in
Yeah, it's like
reality,
put a tampon in it and let's get back to the game.
whack a
Mhm.
tampon in, get on with it.
Mhm.
It's a terrible rhetoric that I think we have been instilled with, and
Mhm.
I feel like our ancestors would be turning in their graves knowing that that's what we're being told these days. And I suspect it is slowly changing, but there is that beautiful innate ancient feminine wisdom about
Mhm.
working with your menstrual cycle. And when you
Mhm.
can do that and when you can lean into it, it is such a superpower. So when you are menstruating, your hormone levels and your energy levels are at their lowest. It's actually extremely energy draining for your uterus to release and shed the lining and all of the buildup from the previous month. It takes a lot for your body to do that. And when you push yourself to go and exercise during your period, you're putting an additional amount of stress on your body just to meet those energy requirements to get through the workout.
Mhm.
But if you can say, oh, okay, I'm bleeding, and I know when you are trying to conceive, this comes with a lot of grief and a lot of emotion as well. But if we can just let our bodies take some time and some rest, at least for the first 3 days, or at least for when your period is heavy, and sleep in, skip the gym, go for a gentle walk, get outdoors, keep moving, but don't push your body. And here is where our restorative yoga practices come into play. So these are really gentle release poses that take away tension from the body, particularly if you do get menstrual pain. It's a lovely way to
Mhm.
relieve tension around the lower back and the hips. So that's what I really want students and anyone who's listening to this to know, that your period is your invitation to rest. And I should point out, though, that if you do take rest at this time, you are setting yourself up for a more balanced month ahead. So if you are increasing your levels of stress and cortisol at this time of the month, that's going to create follow-on problems, for ovulation later on in the cycle. So when we have finished our period or it gets lighter, if you start kind of really listening to your body, you should notice you get a bit of a burst of energy at this stage. And
Mhm.
here's where we can start to get into those more energetic workouts. I wouldn't say straight away, like the day your period is finished, but you can ease into it. But as we work through the follicular phase and up to ovulation, which is like the peak, your hormone levels are at their highest, your energy levels should be at their highest. That's where we can go for, our HIIT classes, spin classes, let's go for a longer run. Let's really work with that energy and let the body continue to build. And it's, when you can really lean into those lovely feelings of energetic power, it gives you kind of a nice free will to go and do whatever exercise that you want.
Mhm.
And then after ovulation, so two things are going to happen. You're either pregnant and your body is preparing for implantation and about to work harder than it ever has in its entire life, or you're not pregnant. And no matter what happens, your hormone levels will change. So if you are pregnant, your progesterone and your estrogen levels are going to continue to rise. But at the same time, your body is working very, very hard. If you're not pregnant, all of your hormone levels are going to start dropping. And of course, they reach baseline and you'll menstruate again. So no matter what's going on, if you are trying to conceive, you need to let your body, again, take a little bit of a step back. And let's now move into, again, not complete rest. We do still want to exercise and keep blood flowing and circulation going because that has a whole myriad of benefits, but let's bring the intensity down. So we're not going to exercise as frequently, maybe for not as long, shorter workouts. And, this isn't the time to be doing spin classes, CrossFit, HIIT workouts, things like that. It's more like how
Mhm.
we keep our energy flowing, but without overexerting or exhausting ourselves. So that's how we
Mhm.
kind of structure exercise around the menstrual cycle. The beautiful thing about fertility yoga is that we have specific poses and practices that we match to each phase of the cycle. And this is designed to do a whole bunch of things. And we can get into that. I can talk about this stuff for a long time. But it is the way fertility yoga is designed is to support each stage of the cycle specifically.
That's amazing. Yeah. So you're giving your body exactly what it needs when it needs it for optimal hormone balance. And with the hormones balanced, you have a better chance then in preparing your body to optimize its fertility powers, right?
Mm. That is absolutely right. And, I like to talk about this because you see a lot on social media about people promising you this idea of balancing your hormones.
Hmm.
And I think that's all well and good, but we have a lot of hormones within the body. So it's important to point out which hormones that you're trying to target and why. So if you see someone on social media trying to tell you that they can balance your hormones, that's a good question to ask them, which hormones and why. So with
Hmm.
fertility yoga, what we are specifically trying to do is reduce the level of cortisol and adrenaline and norepinephrine. So these three hormones are produced by your adrenal glands.
Hmm.
So this is the area of the body that becomes activated when your brain senses a threat or danger. So it's what we all know as our fight or flight response. Now, unfortunately, we haven't evolved past the point that we can differentiate between I sense danger, that there is a bear over there who's about to come and eat me, or I'm terrified that my embryo transfer isn't going to be successful. Our brain doesn't actually know the difference between those two incidences. All it knows is danger or threat. So when you are in that state, we've all felt that panic, your heart is racing, you're sitting in the in the waiting area of your doctor's clinic, or you're waiting for that phone call, it's, that horrible, horrible feeling. That is fight or flight. And, it's very hard to sit still. You feel agitated. We find we want to move the body. We need to do anything other than being still. So we've all been there, and that's when our brain goes, we need to protect ourselves. What are we going to do? We're going to get ready to fight or to run. So we start pumping out these hormones, which take the energy requirements away from any part of the body that is not essential to immediate survival. So in an acute moment of danger, imagine you are running away from a bear. You don't need to digest your lunch. You don't need to worry about critical thinking, like, I don't know, playing chess. You don't need to worry about fighting off a virus, and you don't need to procreate or worry about reproduction. Those things are not essential to immediate survival. So this is obviously an extreme example, but over time, the more your body continues to come into that stress response and pump out those hormones, the more it tells your brain that it is in a vigilant state and that conception is not a good idea, because we don't want to conceive when we think our life is in danger. So when you break it down like that, you realize, like, this is a huge deal. This is a big, big thing. And I really relate to a lot of this, and I could feel myself being in fight or flight for years. And, when your brain just doesn't get a chance to rest, it has huge flow-on effects, like the insomnia, like the thyroid condition. Stress is this annoying but inevitable thing that comes with infertility. So bring it back to what hormones we're trying to target and why. Cortisol in particular, it can steal from production of progesterone. So the more cortisol you have, the less able your body is to make progesterone. And we all know that that hormone is crucial for healthy ovulation and, even more crucially, supporting implantation. And that can look like shorter cycles, shorter luteal phases, irregular cycles, odd times of the month for ovulation, and period pain. So with fertility yoga, one of the main things that we're trying to do is reduce the stress hormones that are being pumped through your body. And we do that in many, many ways, and these are extensively researched and scientifically proven ways to reduce stress. Yoga is used in many, many clinical settings, from PTSD to depression, trauma recovery, all of those things. So that is one reason that being able to just be aware of what's happening within your body is so important, and then learning tools to help yourself through that. The other thing that yoga does particularly is so many things I want to say. Which one first? It brings your awareness to your breath in a way that no other form of exercise does. And I'm a Pilates teacher too, and I don't think Pilates quite does this as well as yoga does. So when you are in this state of fight or flight, this is an automatic response. So your autonomic nervous system does all of these things without you having to think about it. Your autonomic nervous system is also responsible for keeping your heart beating, for keeping your liver working, your lungs pumping oxygen, all the things. So you can't control any of these responses, but the one thing you do have control over at any moment is your breath. So when you can override that stress response with a really deep, slow, calming breath, it signals to your brain, oh, we're not in danger. There isn't a threat. We don't need to keep pumping out these stress hormones. We can start to come back into a state of rest and digest. So that's a really, really important thing that yoga teaches you. And then following through that, it allows your body to come out of that sympathetic nervous system response, so the fight or flight response, and into that parasympathetic state. Like I said, that rest and digest state, which is where we can remind ourselves that it's a wonderful time to conceive and to support a pregnancy. And the last thing I'll mention that we do with fertility yoga and the hormone side is we increase circulation and blood flow, and specifically to the brain and to the reproductive organs. And Blood is your body's delivery system for nutrients and hormones. So when you can increase circulation and get it to the areas of the body that it really needs to go, that has a really big impact on your overall health and fertility as well.
Yes, I mean, amazing benefits. So yeah, like you said, recirculating the blood flow, focusing in on that breath, and really giving your body the exercise and the rest that it needs when it needs it. That's amazing. And yoga is a form of meditation. And and I think obviously the research on meditation is also, mind-blowing. But again, I mean, I think for people who find meditation, traditional meditation maybe isn't for them, fertility yoga is another way to go, in regards to reaping some of those benefits with that too.
Definitely. It's funny you say that because I myself struggle still. I meditate every day, but some days I just struggle to sit still, and I struggle with this idea of releasing thoughts, and
Mhm.
this is one of the biggest things that students will say to me when they come and work with me is that I can't meditate, I can't sit still. And do you know what? Sometimes that's not what your body needs. Forcing your body to sit still when you are in that activated sympathetic state is not going to help. It's just going to frustrate you more. So that is when we need to move. That is when we need to find other practices. There are different breathwork practices that we can use that are a bit more energetic, that take more energy from the body, which can bring you back into that state. But it is very normal if you are listening to this and you think, God, I hate sitting still. I can't meditate. This is not for me. That is why we have such an incredible toolkit of practices to support that.
Yeah, I think that's key is like not everything's for everyone. And even if you really love a particular tool, not every day you're going to be in the mood for doing that tool. It may not be the right tool for you every day.
Mm.
So, having a variety and again, one that incorporates so many aspects is huge. So, yeah, thank you for sharing kind of what fertility yoga is and how it can help us. But if we're going to try something like a practice of fertility yoga, how often is do we need to be doing this? Like, is there a time frame? Once a week, twice a week? Ideal time frame for that?
Mhm. So the practices that we do are safe and gentle enough to be practiced every day if you want to, but that is not essential. Sometimes people get really into it and they find that it gives them, such a sense of peace and calm that they do kind of get a bit hooked and they want to do it every day. But the absolute last thing that I would want to give anyone who is struggling with their fertility is another thing to add to their plate. That takes away from the whole intention of yoga and the whole purpose of these practices. So, what I say to people is come to your mat 3 times a week. But on the days that you're not coming to your mat, find another way to come into your practice. And what we see on the mat is only one of 8 parts of yoga. And the other parts are, things like meditation and breath work and the way we treat ourselves and the way we treat others. There's a huge number of components that make up a yoga practice. So on
Mhm.
the days that you're not doing the physical movements, the asana on the mat, maybe that's a day where you do a 5-minute breathwork practice. Maybe that's where you do a meditation, whether that's a moving meditation or something where you're still. Finding ways to incorporate a mind body practice into your day or a mindfulness practice is one of the most beneficial things that you can do if you're struggling to conceive, because when you have been in this fight or flight state for a long time, your brain needs constant reminders that it is not in danger. And having a daily practice is one really good way to do that. And it has a cumulative effect. I find that, if I, we're all in this boat. You get busy, things come up, you go away on holiday, you're out of routine, whatever it might be. I really notice a difference now. I will find it harder to fall asleep. I find my cycle gets a little bit out of whack. But the more I can bring that awareness back to, how can I incorporate these practices within my day, even if I have 5 minutes, finding a way to do that is really, really beneficial.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. So you don't have to commit to a full yoga session every day to still reap those benefits. And just a quick question too, because I have tried other types of yoga before too, like Bikram. Those are typically like 90-minute sessions. What is a typical fertility yoga session? Yeah.
Mm. So with my students, I give them a variety. So I have 15-minute practices, 30-minute practices, and then some that are an hour. So I like to tell them, choose how much time you have and pick a practice that works for you. Look, in a perfect world, we'd all be doing an hour-long practice. That would, I think you get a lot of benefit from a longer
Hmm.
practice. But if that's a barrier to you doing a practice at all, then I would much rather someone do a shorter version than not do one at all. You mentioned Bikram yoga. Can we talk about that for just a moment?
Sure. I'd love to talk about that.
So, if you're looking at yoga on a wider scale, if you are trying to conceive, there are a couple of things that I want you to avoid. Bikram and hot yoga are two of those. And they're essentially the same. If you don't know what the difference is, basically, Bikram is 32 poses, I think, that you do twice. Hot yoga is just a normal vinyasa class that you do in a hot room. Both are in a very heated room. Both are not great for fertility. Like you said, they're 90 minutes in length, which puts an enormous amount of stress on your physical body. And
Hmm.
whether you may not feel stressed because, you're there by choice, you're doing this, you think it's great for your body, it is very stressful on your system. Being in a very hot room for that amount of time doing challenging exercises. So, over time, this can increase your stress response and increase the amount of cortisol your body produces. It's especially bad in the 2-week wait. If you are pregnant, there is a lot of research that connects miscarriage with increased core body temperature. Things like saunas, hot baths, and hot yoga fall into that
Hmm.
category. So, I really encourage people to look, you don't have to give it up forever, but during your time of trying to conceive, hot yoga isn't your best friend. And there is some argument to say, look, it's fine during the follicular phase or the ovulatory phase. I would perhaps, if you can't give it up altogether, try to scale it back and make
Yeah.
sure it's not something you're doing every day and really overwhelming your body. If you do want to practice yoga and you're trying to conceive, I would really emphasize that it's important to work with someone who knows how to practice with the menstrual cycle. Because if
Hmm.
you are doing, fertility yoga practices at home, but then you're going to a studio and you're doing that class at another stage in your cycle, it isn't necessarily going to be what your body needs at that time. So
Hmm.
that is why we do really try to emphasize working with someone who knows how it all works.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that about Bikram and kind of times to avoid that particular type of yoga. But with fertility yoga, can you also do that during the 2-week wait? Is that helpful?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned before, one of the main things that we're wanting to do with yoga is increase that blood flow and circulation. So, we don't want to be completely stagnant or, have no exercise happening at all during the 2-week wait. And I find particularly people who are going through IVF after their embryo transfer, they are so terrified of doing anything wrong.
Hmm.
So be rest assured that the practices we do during the 2-week wait are so gentle. They are less strenuous than walking up a flight of stairs. So doctors will rightly tell most of their patients during IVF to avoid a lot of forms of exercise, which is absolutely right. There's a lot of things we shouldn't be doing during IVF, but if they're questioning your fertility yoga practice during the 2-week wait, you can tell your doctor that all of the things you're doing are less strenuous than going upstairs. So, what that practice looks like at that time, really gentle hip openers, so stretches to release tension in the pelvis, just to open out some space around the lower parts of the body to encourage blood flow to support your uterus. And then again, just keeping circulation going throughout the body overall. So we do things like cat cow, some gentle downward dogs, just some rotation work with the spine. We keep things moving, but
Hmm.
it's very breathwork focused, very meditative, and very gentle.
And honestly, during the 2-week wait is probably the time that you need some sort of practice more than ever because mentally there's a lot going on. So it is so great to hear that it is safe to do fertility yoga during this time to help, again, as you mentioned, with the blood flow, help improve that. But again, also to feel better mentally and relieve some of that stress. So that's great. Now, a couple of other questions here with the fertility yoga. If somebody is not very flexible or they haven't done fertility yoga before, maybe one of my listeners even asked, she's in a bigger body, and she mentioned like, would I even be able to do fertility yoga? Or are there specific poses that I would need to do, differently? Can you shed a little light on who this could be for, really?
Certainly. When we think about yoga in the current day and age that we're in, what most people bring to mind is the fancy acrobatic stuff you see on Instagram. Look, there's a time and a place for that. And if that's what you love and that's what brings you joy, then great. But that is not yoga. In the truest sense of what yoga was intended when it was developed thousands of years ago in the mountains in North India, it was a practice designed to bring you back to your highest self. That was the whole point of yoga. And all of these practices, the exercises we see on the mat, the breath work, the meditation, this was all designed to bring you back to your highest self. So when someone comes to me and says, I'd love to start practicing yoga, but I just need to get a bit more flexible or a little bit fitter first or something like that, breaks my heart a little bit because, that was never the intention. And I hate that that's what we now believe. We see a lot of skinny white girls in fancy little outfits doing crazy things. I can reassure you that, look, maybe my husband's not going to listen to this, so we'll use him as an example. I have some videos for male fertility within my programs. And look, you can go and watch a video of my husband doing yoga. If he can do it, anyone can do it. He's the least flexible person I have ever met. So the practices are very, very safe. And, as I mentioned before, because I come from an exercise science background, one of my main concerns with teaching people exercise is keeping their bodies physically safe. But I feel confident doing online work within the fertility yoga space because there's only so many ways you can hurt yourself when you're lying around on pillows. It's not a difficult practice. Yes, there are going to be exercises that, if you are very stiff or, perhaps you have had previous injuries that you're going to find more challenging, but there are always ways that we can modify those. And I think your example of women who have bigger bodies is a really good one because I think they see that as a barrier as well to a practice. But as long as you can get some pillows and sit comfortably, as long as you can stand up, you can move from side to side, that is the majority of what we do. It is not about being uber flexible. Some of the very intense poses and stretches that you see within yoga can be quite stressful on the body. So that's not what we're wanting to do. All of the work we do is gentle, and it's designed to bring you into your body. So when someone does say to me, I'm really struggling to get into that pose, or, it doesn't, when you do it, Jen, it doesn't look like the way I do it. That's actually great because it tells me that you are being aware of your body and you're listening to what it's telling you. You're noticing the sensations. And that's kind of what yoga is all about. So I hope that reassures some people.
Definitely. I love that. So I don't have to be able to do the splits or do, headstands or anything like that, which I've never been able to do either of those to
Hell
do
no.
fertility yoga.
No.
That's great to hear. So I have another question, and this one is actually exclusive to my True Fertility Tribe group. So let's get into that one. So you offer Pilates too. Is that something that should be a consideration and that can help us when trying to conceive? Are you interested in getting the answer to this question? Well, this is your personal invite to join our exclusive Facebook group to dive deeper into the world of fertility with bonus clips, behind-the-scenes content, and intimate discussions. Here you can connect with fellow tribe members, share your experiences, and contribute your insights to shape the future of the show. And it's easy to join. Just search True Fertility Tribe on Facebook, answer a few questions, and you're in. I also have the direct link in the show notes below. See you there. So, is there anything else that you'd want listeners to know about fertility for yoga before we wrap up? Or is there anything else that you feel like needs to get screamed from the mountaintops?
There is one thing that I didn't mention that I think that fertility yoga gave me on my practice. And especially if you are going through assisted treatments and you're going down the path of IVF, it is your body is taken away from you completely. You hand over your body and your power to doctors, procedures, medications, all of these things, even internal ultrasounds. Like there's endless things that we have to go through are so traumatic. And as I said, you completely give your power away. And when things don't work, you are completely lost because you don't know who to trust anymore. And we always tend to blame ourselves and our bodies. But the thing that I love about yoga, and whilst I wish more than anything I had a magic wand that said, look, come and do fertility yoga with me for a month and you will absolutely fall pregnant. Oh my goodness, what I wouldn't give for that. But what I can absolutely promise you is that it will bring you back to realizing how capable you are and just reconnecting with your body and allowing you to trust your body again. And how that works, I think, is when you start to see these small changes in your life, you realize that doing a practice like that really does show you how capable you are. Like I said, I was noticing these little changes like my improved sleep and my better mood and my better cycle, my healthier cycle before I fell pregnant. And all of these little things that kept happening just reminded me, wow, like there is a lot that I can do and I don't have to give my power away. So I want people to know that. That is absolutely something that a practice like this will give you, regardless of knowing exactly what the outcome is going to be.
I love that. Reclaiming some of our power when we feel like so much is taken away. That's huge. That's gold. So thank you so much, Jen. Just a quick recap for everyone. Fertility yoga, first off, that's where it's at, right? It aligns to your different phases of your menstrual cycle. You can do it daily, even during the 2-week wait. And it's really for everyone. And it really helps to help you with improving your fertility and reducing those stress hormones and feeling better and reclaiming a little bit of your power back. So what a beautiful practice. I love that so much. Jen, for our listeners, if they're interested in, learning more about you, where is the best place that they can, reach you?
Sure. I probably would spend the most amount of my online time on Instagram. So my handle is jen.elementpilatesyoga, but you can also find me on TikTok as well. I also have a free fertility yoga guide. If you want to get started with this practice and you don't know where to begin, that's a really lovely way. It walks you through practices for each phase of your cycle. It gives you some meditation work to do as well as some breathwork practices. So I'll give you the link to that also. And I think that is a really nice way to connect with me and just see if this practice is for you, if it's something that works for you and your body.
Perfect. And I will put all of Jen's contact information in my show notes below for today. And because I really love all of Jen's work and really support all that she does, I'm actually an affiliate for her fertility and IVF programs. And you can get a special discount for signing up with my coupon code Leah. And I will put the link to her program to sign up in the show notes below. Thank you so much for your time with us today, Jen. Love you. We have learned so much. It was so informational and can't wait to talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Leah. Honored to be here.
You're so welcome. Yeah. Thank you for allowing me to share these stories, information, and tips with you, or really just allowing me to connect with you on a subject that's so dear and important to your life. I really hope that somewhere out there I was able to reach one of you and to let you know that, again, you're not alone on this journey. Please make sure to subscribe to the podcast and do me a solid and share this with your friends or anyone that you think might benefit from hearing this. Also, I'd love it if you could leave a rating or review from wherever you're listening. If you have any questions or you want to share anything about what you heard today with us, please leave a comment on YouTube or Spotify. And for a deeper dive on today's episode, bonus content, and to connect with others in this space, I invite you to join True Fertility Tribe Facebook group. And last but not least, let's be friends on Instagram, where I post almost daily. You can find me at True Fertility. Wishing you all baby dust. Till next time. Bye.